The temperature dropped to 20 degrees that Christmas Eve, and I, someone worth hundreds of millions, was curled up in the back seat of a Honda, parked quietly in my sister's driveway. Inside, her mansion glowed with golden lights and laughter, but outside, I was just the failure in the family. At least, that's what they still believed. That night, as frost began to bloom on my windshield, I could hear the clink of glasses and the hum of Diana's perfect Christmas party echoing from behind the double-glazed windows. Everyone was there, our parents, family friends, even her new boss from Blackwater Capital. Everyone, except me. Earlier that day, Diana had laughed and said, "The guest rooms are for important people, but hey, feel free to sleep in your car. You're used to that, right?" She had no idea who she was talking to. Because the truth? That old Honda was a costume. The real me was the reason her firm even still existed. In the next few minutes, you'll hear how I built a financial tech empire while everyone thought I was broke. You'll see how I turned years of silence into the sharpest revenge without ever raising my voice. And how, on that very Christmas morning, the woman who mocked me had to serve coffee to the sister she made sleep in the cold. But first, let me take you back 7 years. To the moment I decided that being underestimated was the greatest advantage I ever had. The cold didn't bother me that much. Not really. What stayed with me was the sentence that made it clear. I no longer belonged. "The guest rooms are for important people," Diana had said, smiling like it was a joke. "But hey, you can sleep in your car if you're staying for Christmas morning. You're probably used to that." That was the last thing she said before shutting the door. Behind her, the grand entryway of her mansion glowed with warmth. Garlands, chandeliers, a perfectly trimmed 12-foot tree. I stood outside with a blanket and a bag of gifts no one would open. I'd arrived thinking maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. That after all the years, all the distance, there'd be a little space left for me. Maybe not in her heart, but at least in a spare bedroom. Instead, I ended up in my old Honda, parked behind the gardener's shed. The same car Diana loved to mock at every family gathering. "You really should upgrade," she'd smirk, "unless that's all your startup dreams can afford." She never knew the truth. No one did. As the party carried on inside, laughter, clinking glasses, distant piano music, I curled up in the back seat, watching my breath fog up the windows. I could have driven back to my penthouse. I could have spent the night in any hotel I wanted, anywhere in the city. But I chose to stay, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Because something bigger was coming in the morning. Something that would finally answer all the smirks, the dismissals, the condescension. Not with anger, but with clarity. So I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the stars. The guest rooms weren't for me. But that didn't mean the story was over. And it certainly didn't mean I was done watching how far they'd go before they realized who I really was. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, even by your own family, let me know in the comments. I read every word, and if you'd like to follow the rest of this story, hit subscribe. There's more than one kind of revenge, and it doesn't always look like payback. I wasn't always the outsider. There was a time when Diana and I were just two sisters sharing late-night secrets under one roof, trading dreams and fears like friendship bracelets. But somewhere between her first corporate job and my first failed pitch deck, something shifted. And suddenly, I became the punchline in my own family. Every holiday became a quiet performance. Diana would walk in dressed in designer coats and louder accomplishments. "I just got promoted again." "We're flying to Aspen next month." Our parents would beam, offer her the seat of honor, pour her wine before she even asked. And me? They'd ask if I'd finally considered something stable. "Maybe your sister can get you an interview at her firm," Mom would whisper, half hopeful, half embarrassed. I remember one dinner when Dad joked that at least my ramen noodle diet helped me stay slim. Everyone laughed. I did too, because pretending it didn't sting was easier than showing it did. What they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that I wasn't failing. I was building. Slowly, quietly, painfully. While Diana climbed a well-lit corporate ladder, I was carving my own path in the dark. There were nights I slept on the office couch, days when a single investor call felt like oxygen. I taught myself to code, pitch, lead, and more than anything, to endure. And still, I never corrected them, not because I enjoyed the ridicule, but because I wanted to see how long it would last, how long the people who claimed to love me would keep measuring my worth by title and paycheck, how easily they'd write me off, so long as I didn't shine in the ways they understood. 7 years passed like that. 7 years of nodding, smiling, letting them believe I was less. And with every dismissive word, I became more certain. One day, the silence would break itself. And that day would start with a contract, a company, and a name they'd all recognize. Phenor Technologies started with a folding table, a dying laptop, and a stubborn belief that the future of banking wasn't sitting in some walnut-paneled boardroom. It was being ignored by people like my sister. Traditional firms were too slow, too proud to evolve. And I knew if I moved fast enough, I could build something they wouldn't see coming until it was everywhere. The first 2 years were brutal. I lived in a shared studio, coded through migraines, and pitched to investors who never called back. There were nights I thought about quitting, quiet, dangerous nights when failure felt like gravity. But each morning, I got up, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove myself right. In year 3, it happened. A small regional bank took a chance on Phenor. Our system cut their digital transaction costs by 40%, tripled their user retention, and got us on the radar. By year 4, we signed 3 of the top 10 banks in the country. By year 5, we were in 12 countries. And yet, I told no one at home. I still showed up in my faded coat, still drove the same car Diana mocked, still smiled through dinner as she bragged about corner offices and business class flights. Not because I didn't want to tell them, but because I needed to know. Would they ever see me beyond what I wore? Would they ever value more than what they could measure? The silence became my mirror. In it, I saw who they really were and who I was becoming. Not the rebel, not the failure, but the architect, the strategist, the woman who didn't need their approval to build an empire. And while they looked down at me from their carefully arranged thrones, I was laying the foundation to stand taller than they could ever imagine. But the real twist? They had no idea the company Diana just joined was one of my biggest clients. The Honda was intentional. So was the $60 coat I wore to Thanksgiving, and the modest apartment address I gave my mother, just in case she ever decided to visit, which she never did. I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was observing, because there's something deeply revealing about how people treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them. The truth? My real life was 10 stories above a skyline view, quiet, sunlit, with a walk-in closet bigger than Diana's kitchen. I owned 3 properties under holding names, a car collection I never posted, and a private chef who thought I had a dairy allergy just because I liked how she prepared almond risotto. Diana had been bragging about her new job for weeks. Blackwater Capital is the real deal, she told anyone who'd listen. Elizabeth Chin is a legend. This role is finally going to put me where I belong. I nodded politely every time, even when she offered to put in a good word for me. It was almost cute, if only she knew. Because a month before Diana joined, Blackwater signed a $100 million deal to overhaul their global financial infrastructure. And the platform they chose? Finor Technologies, my company. Elizabeth Chin and I had already spoken half a dozen times by then. In fact, she was the one who called me personally to finalize the deal. She was sharp, meticulous, and, when she found out how Diana had been treating me, quietly furious. "Let's make Christmas educational," she'd said in our last meeting, a sly smile playing on her lips. And I agreed. Not for revenge, but for revelation. Because I didn't want Diana to feel humiliated. I wanted her to understand just how wrong she had been, about who mattered, about what success looked like, and most of all, about how character isn't always dressed in designer shoes. So we planned it. Elizabeth would drop by Christmas morning, ostensibly to greet her new employee's family. The Forbes article naming me Businesswoman of the Year would go live at 7 a.m., and Diana, curled up in her holiday robe, coffee in hand, would come face to face with the woman she once told to get a real job. I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth was about to speak for itself. And the best part? She still had no idea what was coming. But none of that was the point. I stayed quiet because I wanted to understand something most people never get to test. Would the people who claim to love you still respect you if they thought you were small? Spoiler, they didn't. Not once in 7 years. Not when I landed a multi-million-dollar partnership. Not when I gave a TEDx talk under an alias. Not even when I was named in the 40 under 40 list, because I used my middle name and no one in my family bothered to read beyond the title. They saw the Honda, they saw the coat, and they drew their conclusions. But while they sipped their champagne and laughed at poor little Madison, I was drafting something far more precise than a comeback. A plan. One built not on bitterness, but on timing. Because you see, Diana's new job at Blackwater Capital, she had no idea her department's biggest tech deal had my signature on it. And Christmas morning, let's just say that's when the final puzzle piece would click into place. What would you have done in my place? Told her sooner? Or waited like I did? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your take. And if you want to see how Christmas morning went, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss it. I woke to frost-laced windows and the soft ping of a notification on my phone. Now live. Forbes, Businesswoman of the Year, Madison Corzio and the Future of Global Finance. 7 a.m., right on schedule. I sat up in my car, breath fogging the glass, and looked toward the kitchen window. Inside, Diana moved like she was orchestrating a symphony, pointing, checking, perfecting. The breakfast table was set in her signature style, imported linens, gold-rimmed china, and a floral centerpiece taller than the coffee pot. She had no idea her perfect holiday tableau was about to crack wide open. At 7:03, I watched her settle into the breakfast nook, coffee in hand, tablet on the table. She always read business news with her morning brew, habit she'd once called how real leaders start their day. Seconds later, I heard the crash. Ceramic against tile. A gasp. Then silence. Inside, Diana stood frozen, holding her tablet like it might explode. My photo, taken at the Tech Awards in a backless Chanel gown, beamed from the screen. The headline glowed like fire. I stepped out of my car. She opened the door before I could knock, pale, shaking, disoriented. This "This can't be right," she stammered, thrusting the tablet toward me. "This woman, it looks like you, but she's the CEO of Finor Technologies," I finished calmly. "Yes, that's me." Silence. Then footsteps. Our mother appeared in the hallway, eyes scanning the screen. Her hands trembled. But you said you were struggling." "I let you believe that," I said softly, "because I wanted to see how long you'd keep treating me like someone you didn't have to respect." And right then, the doorbell rang. Diana flinched. She didn't need to guess who it was. Elizabeth Chin, her new boss, my business partner, and the final piece in a revelation 7 years in the making. Diana opened the door with the composure of someone clinging to the last thread of control. "Good morning," Elizabeth Chin said, stepping inside with a confident smile. "Madison, I hope the car wasn't too cold last night." Diana blinked. You know each other?" Elizabeth chuckled, the kind of knowing laugh only powerful women allow themselves. "Madison is one of our most critical technology partners. We speak weekly. Her company is revolutionizing how Blackwater manages global transactions." Weekly. That word landed like a weight. Diana's breath caught. "And," Elizabeth continued, glancing around the ornate breakfast setup, "when she mentioned her sister had joined our firm, I thought it was time to see things up close." Our mother stood in the corner, clutching the tablet like it might offer an escape. I sat down at the head of the table, Diana's spot, while Elizabeth took the chair beside me. The linen napkins were flawless, the croissants still warm. Diana hovered awkwardly before mumbling, "Would anyone like coffee?" "Please," Elizabeth said, "if it's not too much trouble." And just like that, my sister, the one who once bragged about her corner office, who laughed at my coat, who said I could sleep in my car, was pouring coffee for the CEO she'd underestimated and the sister she'd dismissed. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was clarity. Because in that moment, everything inverted. Her status, her certainty, her assumption of importance. And yet, I wasn't cruel. I thanked her for the coffee, and then turned to Elizabeth to discuss our Asia-Pacific expansion plans. Right there, across from the woman who'd once offered me an entry-level job in her department. Diana didn't speak for the rest of the hour. She just listened. To numbers she didn't understand. To deals she wasn't invited into. To the quiet, unwavering voice of the sister she thought had nothing. But the lesson wasn't over. Not yet. After Elizabeth left, silence settled like fresh snow across the house. Diana stood at the window, arms crossed tightly, watching her boss's car disappear down the long driveway. She didn't look back at me, not until she whispered, "Why?" I met her eyes, not with anger, but with something heavier. Why keep this a secret? Why let us treat you like someone who deserved to sleep in their car? I breathed in slowly. Because I needed to know who you really were, and now I do. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been proven without a word. Our mother tried to speak. "Madison, we didn't know. We just thought—" "I know what you thought," I said gently, "and I let you keep thinking it. Not because I wanted to punish you, but because I stopped needing your approval a long time ago." There was no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet woman in a simple coat, standing taller than she ever had, because this time she didn't need to be seen. She already knew her worth. I picked up my phone and glanced at the dozens of unread messages, family, former classmates, distant cousins suddenly remembering I existed. None of them mattered. That night, I stood on stage at a charity gala wearing the same gown from the Forbes photo. But I wasn't thinking about cameras or applause. I was thinking about a different kind of spotlight, the kind that shines not on power, but on grace, on knowing when to speak and when silence says more. In the end, I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed to live well enough that the truth destroyed every lie they told about me. Some lessons don't need to be screamed. They just need to arrive, wrapped in dignity and delivered at exactly the right moment. And that, I've learned, is the quiet power of being underestimated. If this story made you feel seen, even just a little, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. And if you'd like more stories about quiet strength, real power, and women who rise with grace, subscribe. This is only the beginning.